the signs, having it all, continue to drive the planet towards absolute catastrophe. Not only that, but in many cases governments are actively working against those who would try to ban. The leader of the Green Party, it seems from the parliamentary question answer that he gave, he personally authorised the decision of the Irish state to spend public money to fight in the European Court of Human Rights against the so-called Swiss grannies, a group of elderly Swiss women who took a case to the European Court of Human Rights saying that Switzerland was not protecting their rights to have action taken on climate change. And the Irish state, unlike the vast majority of states, didn't intervene with the Green Party in government to support the Swiss grannies, intervened against the Swiss grannies, against climate action. I think that is extremely serious, extremely symptomatic of the role of the so-called Green Party, and I think we need to hear a clear explanation from Eamon Ryan as to how on earth this happened, and I think we should hear an apology from Eamon Ryan to the so-called Swiss grannies, but also to the Irish public whose money was used pursuing this case, which incidentally, of course, the Swiss grannies were successful in their case. So that's something we're definitely going to be raising this week. The other brief point I wanted to mention is obviously there's been a lot of discussion about the inaction of the Gardaí when confronted with threatening scenes, violence and so on by far-right agitators. It is very, very clear that this hesitancy to act only appears to strike the Gardaí when it comes to actions of far-right agitators. Again and again and again, there's no hesitancy to use force against Debenhams workers, against water charges protesters, against Palestine solidarity protesters. Just yesterday, again, we had another striking illustration of this. The president of UCD Students' Union was attending an event with Nancy Pelosi, a supporter of genocide. She stood up to speak. Barely one word was out of her mouth. She's a representative of UCD students. Barely one word was out of her mouth before Gardaí grabbed her and bundled her out of the room. She didn't represent any threat to anybody. She was simply opposing Nancy Pelosi and her support for genocide. There are numerous people who've been arrested under public order offences, not protesting with masks, stopping cars, putting banners on people's homes, simply protesting in city centres at protests. So there's a very, very serious question to answer here about why the very, very stark double standards, and I think it relates to the decision which was widely publicised a year ago or so to take a hands-off approach to policing the far right, which was then endorsed by the government, where very, very clearly the powers of the state is being used to protect those who are fighting for social justice, who are protesting against genocide, who are standing up for workers' rights, and yet nothing is being done about librarians being harassed, pharmacists being harassed, asylum seekers being harassed.
Okay, so today is a big day for the Stardust victims and for their families. I look forward to seeing them pack out the galleries in here and getting the apology that they should have gotten very, very, very long ago. I just want to say that if the state's apology today is sincere, then the state must stop denying justice to all of the families who are waiting 45 years for justice after the Whitty disaster of 1979. I understand that those families have written to the Taoiseach seeking a one-to-one meeting with him. I think he should grant it. And I also understand that those families are calling for fresh inquests into the events of January 1979, and the state should grant those fresh inquests. I will be raising this point in the Dáil later today.
Deputy Boyd Barrett, we had the news yesterday that radio broadcaster Niall Boylan will be contesting the European elections. As we understand it, he's going to continue his radio show on Classic Hits. Is it your understanding that that is within the broadcasting rules, or do you see any issue there with the appropriateness of an election candidate on a daily radio show?
I wasn't aware of that, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, it's if the radio is supposed to be independent and impartial, I think that is a problem for him to be standing as a candidate. And I'd have to say, not that I listen to his show, if I'm being honest with you, I wouldn't put myself through that. But I certainly, insofar as I'm aware of his views, I think they would be, to put it mildly, problematic. So I think that would be, I would have significant concerns about it. I have to be honest and say I wasn't aware of it, so I don't want to say much more than that, but yeah, I think that's probably you probably know a bit more.
I didn't realise you were giving that.
But he has certainly been inflaming some of the fairly toxic ideas being pushed by some of our far-right actors in this country, and I think that's pretty worrying that he would be standing and would still have that kind of media platform.
Will you be raising the incident that happened in Berlin on Saturday, where a number of Irish protesters were prohibited from speaking Irish and harassed by Berlin?
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. We put out a statement, just to say, we put out a statement and circulated an open letter last week over the fact that myself and others were participants at a conference in Berlin the weekend before about Palestine and about the possibility that genocide was, and I believe is, taking place in Gaza that was banned in pretty horrendous circumstances. So I was prevented from speaking. Yanis Varoufakis, former Greek Prime Minister, a Dutch MP, and many Jewish critics of Israeli apartheid and of Israel's criminal actions in Gaza. And that conference, and the organisers knew in advance, 2,500 riot police were deployed for that conference that had about 250 attendees, and then was stormed shortly before myself and Yanis Varoufakis were due to speak. We circulated a letter, we got about 20 TDs to sign it, and then you get the following week this unbelievable situation where the Irish language is deemed like it's illegal to use it in the context of protests for Palestine, and as I understand it, the Arabic language can only be spoken after 6 p.m. I mean, this is unbelievable attack on freedom of speech. Representative of this country to make criticism of German complicity with the Palestinian genocide, but it's very, very worrying that the German government is attacking freedom of speech and freedom of assembly in this way. And it'll be interesting to see, does the German ambassador respond to the letter that we have sent him, signed by a cross-party group with Sinn Féin TDs, Social Democrats, independent TDs, people for profit obviously, and others.
Are there any government TDs in that?
I don't think so. No, interestingly. So yeah, I think the Irish government should be very vociferously challenging the German government over this. I have my doubts as to whether they will, because I think the government pays lip service too often to its solidarity with the Palestinian people, but rarely is really willing to challenge the horrendous level of complicity of the German and other EU governments with Israel's crimes.
Deputy Murphy, can I ask you about the Swiss case?
Yeah.
Eamon Ryan's spokesperson clarified that it was acting on the Attorney General's advice that he sought government approval. Does that change your criticism at all?
No, it doesn't. I don't think that a minister can hide behind the Attorney General. I mean, the Attorney General provides legal advice, but the government makes the decisions on the advice of, on the proposal of a minister. You know, it's like you or I can go and get legal advice on something and may choose to take a court case based on the legal advice. But ultimately, you make the decision to take the court case or to intervene in a court case. It's on you. You can't blame your lawyer. You can't hide behind your lawyer. So I think, like, it boggles the mind. I really do think that, like, you know, I think many people were shocked enough when the Irish state intervened in the Swiss grannies case against the Swiss grannies, you know, on the side of destroying the climate. But I think then people's minds were absolutely blown when it emerged that, like, this was a decision taken by the leader of the Green Party. And I just don't think that explains it at all. So I do think we have to hear from Eamon Ryan about this. He has to subject himself to some questioning, be it from the media or from ourselves, to understand, like, he signed off on this. Like, why did he sign off on this? Why did he think this was a good idea? I think you would probably know more than this, but I think he had statements after the victory of the Swiss grannies, statements implying that this was, like, a good thing, which is, like, deeply ironic. When he's engaged in a court case to try and beat them, his side loses, and then he kind of celebrates the losing. It doesn't make any sense. And again, I would stress, like, public money was spent on this. No money needed to be spent. The Irish state did not need to intervene. So I still think there's very serious questions outstanding.